So before we go any further, before we get into what CTT is actually walking into, before we talk about what Galino's patience is really costing Tommy, before we get to the offshore rig and what it represents beyond the obvious, ask yourself one question. If the trailer is already this heavy, this loaded, this deliberately suffocating in what it is choosing to reveal, what exactly is it working this hard to keep you from seeing? Let's talk about CTT, because the trailer wants you to see it as a symbol of hope. It wants you to look at Tommy standing beside Cooper and TL and feel something warm about it, something that reads like resilience, like a man who got knocked down and chose to get back up on his own terms. And on one level, that reading is completely valid. CTT is real. The choice to walk away from MTEX and build something from the ground up with his son and his father-in-law is one of the most genuinely human decisions Tommy Norris has ever made in this entire story. After 2 full seasons of watching him hold together other people's empires with nothing but his instincts and a stubbornness that borders on self-destruction, watching him finally choose something that belongs entirely to him feels significant. It feels like a declaration, and it is. But here is what the trailer is very carefully not letting you get comfortable with. A declaration is not a shield. And in the oil business, in the specific and unforgiving world that Landman has spent 2 seasons building around us, the moment you declare something, the moment you stand up and say clearly, this is mine, and these are my people, and this is what I am building, you have not protected yourself. You have painted a target. You have handed every single person who wants leverage over you a map to everything that matters most to you. And Tommy Norris, of all people, knows this. He has spent his entire career watching that exact dynamic destroy people who were smarter and better resourced than him. Which means the choice to bring Cooper and TL into CTT was not made in ignorance. It was made in full awareness of the risk. And that awareness, that conscious decision to choose family anyway, knowing exactly what it costs, is one of the most important things the trailer is telling us about where Tommy's head is right now. He is not optimistic. He is not naive. He is a man who looked at everything available to him after the wreckage of MTEX and decided that the only foundation worth building on, even knowing how exposed it makes him, is the one made of people he actually loves. That is not hope. That is desperation dressed up in the language of conviction, and the trailer knows it. Now look at Cooper specifically, because what the trailer is doing with Cooper this season is something that deserves far more attention than it is currently getting. Season 2 established Cooper's talent in a way that felt almost uncomfortable. The way genuinely exceptional ability always makes the people around it a little uncomfortable, because it raises the stakes for everyone. That instinct for refineries and operations and the deep mechanical logic of the oil industry is not something you develop. It is something you are born carrying and either learn to use or get consumed by. Cooper was born carrying it. And in Season 2, that talent started attracting exactly the kind of attention that Tommy had spent years trying to protect him from. But in Season 2, Cooper was operating under the relative cover of MTEX. There were layers between him and the full force of what his ability could attract. Institutional layers, structural layers, the specific kind of insulation that only a large established company provides simply by existing around you. CTT has none of that. CTT is new and small and built almost entirely on the strength of the relationships between its founders. Which means Cooper in Season 3 is not just Tommy's son working in the oil business. He is one of the 3 load-bearing pillars of an operation that cannot afford to lose any one of them without the entire structure becoming dangerously unstable. And the trailer is making it very clear that the people who want to get to Tommy have already noticed this. There are moments in this trailer where the camera lingers on Cooper in a way that is not about pride or progress. It is about exposure, about the specific vulnerability that comes from being talented and visible and attached to someone who has made a significant number of powerful enemies over the course of a very complicated career. Cooper's marriage to Ariana adds another layer onto all of this that the trailer is only beginning to peel back. Because Cooper is no longer just a son navigating his father's world. He is a man trying to build a private life, a real life with a real person who chose him outside of all of this, while simultaneously being pulled deeper and deeper into an industry and a family dynamic that has historically consumed everything personal in its path. The tension between those two realities, between the life Cooper is trying to build with Ariana and the life that CTT is demanding of him, is not a background detail in this trailer. It is a pressure point. And pressure points in Landman do not stay background details for long. Then there is TL. And this is where the trailer gets genuinely complicated in a way that most people are glossing over entirely. TL's presence in CTT is being framed as loyalty, as the deep, long-standing, tested-by-fire kind of loyalty that only exists between people who have been through real hardship together. And that framing is accurate as far as it goes. The bond between Tommy and TL is one of the most quietly powerful relationships this show has built across 2 seasons, precisely because it does not need to announce itself. It does not need dramatic declarations or emotional speeches. It is simply there, in the way they exist in the same space together, in the shorthand between them, in the unspoken understanding that certain things do not need to be explained because they were both present when those things happened. But here is what the trailer is very gently and very deliberately hinting at underneath that loyalty. TL coming into CTT is not a clean addition. TL brings history. Specific, complicated, unresolved history that does not disappear simply because the company name has changed. And in an operation as young and fragile as CTT, history is not always an asset. Sometimes history is weight. Sometimes history is the thing that makes a straightforward decision impossible because of everything that came before it. And the trailer is already planting seeds around TL that suggest his arc this season is going to be about more than simply standing beside Tommy while the next storm arrives. There is something in the way he is positioned in certain frames of this trailer that carries a quiet unease. Not disloyalty, not betrayal. Something more human than either of those things. Something that looks like a man who loves the people around him deeply and is beginning to understand that love alone is not always enough to protect them from the choices that still need to be made. What the trailer is setting up with CTT as a whole is essentially this. Tommy Norris has built the most meaningful thing he has ever built. And he has built it out of the most vulnerable possible materials. Not because he didn't know better, but because after everything, after MTEX and Cammy and Monty and every compromise, and every sacrifice and every moment where the cost of this industry landed directly on something he cared about, he decided that meaningful mattered more than safe. And Season 3 is about to show us in the most uncompromising terms possible exactly what that decision costs when the world this show has built around him decides to collect. Because the threats closing in on CTT in this trailer are not abstract. They are not theoretical. They are specific, and they are patient, and they understand, perhaps better than Tommy wants to admit, that the fastest way to break a man who has survived everything is not to come at him directly. It is to come at the thing he built his last remaining hope around. And right now, that thing has 3 names on it. CTT, Cooper, TL. And every single one of them is exposed in ways that MTEX, for all its dysfunction, never allowed them to be. So, here's the question the trailer is quietly building toward, underneath all of the dramatic tension and the emotional weight and the carefully constructed imagery of a man trying to hold something new together with the same hands that have already lost so much. If Tommy Norris built CTT knowing exactly how exposed it would make the people he loves most, knowing exactly what kind of attention it would attract, and what kind of enemies it would inherit from everything that came before it, then what exactly does he know that this trailer is still not showing us? And more importantly, who already— The Season 3 trailer for Landman is not a teaser, it is a warning. And most people who watched it completely missed what it was actually saying. Here is the thing nobody is saying out loud right now. The Landman Season 3 trailer is not built to excite you. It is built to unsettle you. Every single frame of it, every line of dialogue, every carefully chosen silence between the words is designed to do one specific thing, which is to make you feel the weight of what is coming before you, are anywhere close to ready for it. And if you watched it and walked away thinking you understood what Season 3 is setting up, I want you to sit with that confidence for a moment, because this trailer is operating on at least 3 different levels simultaneously, and the surface level, the one that most people are reacting to, is actually the least important one. Let's establish exactly where we are first, because you cannot understand what this trailer is hiding until you understand what it is choosing to show you. Season 2 ended with Tommy Norris standing at something that looked, from a distance, like a new beginning. Monty was gone. The suffocating pressure of keeping MTEX from collapsing under its own dysfunction had finally lifted. CTT oil exploration and cattle existed on paper, and in intention, and in the specific kind of stubborn hope that only a man like Tommy Norris can manufacture, out of pure wreckage. And for one brief, almost unbearable moment, it felt like the show was finally going to let this man have something real, something that was actually his, something built on his terms, for his people, around the only foundation he has ever genuinely trusted, which is family. That moment lasted exactly as long as the show needed it to last before it started building the next catastrophe underneath it. Because that is what this trailer is. It is the catastrophe that was being built underneath that moment of peace. And it did not arrive the way catastrophes usually arrive in television, loudly and obviously, and with every dramatic signal firing at once. It arrived quietly. It arrived in the spaces between the scenes. It arrived in what the trailer chose not to show you just as much as in what it did. And that is where the real conversation about Season 3 needs to happen. Not in the explosions, or the confrontations, or the surface-level drama that any trailer breakdown can walk you through in 10 minutes, but in the specific and deliberate absences. In the things that are missing from this trailer that should be there if Season 3 were simply a continuation of what came before. And the most important absence, the one that restructures everything else around it, is not a character or a plotline or a location. It is a feeling. The feeling of possibility that Season 2 ended with is completely gone from this trailer. Not diminished, not complicated, gone. And the show did that on purpose. Tommy Norris in this trailer is not a man standing at the beginning of something. He is a man standing in the middle of a reckoning that started long before Season 3 and has no clean resolution in sight. The exhausted confidence that Billy Bob Thornton carries in every frame is still there, because that never leaves Tommy entirely. It is too deeply written into who he is. But there is something underneath it now that the previous 2 seasons only hinted at. There is a rawness sitting just below the surface of every scene he is in. A brittleness that Tommy would never name out loud, and would fight hard to make sure no one else named either. But it is there. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Because this is not a man who lost a job or a company or a professional relationship. This is a man who lost the version of his life that had Cammy in it. And that loss is not sitting quietly in the background of this trailer, behaving itself, staying out of the way of the plot mechanics. That loss is the architecture of everything. Season 3 is building. Every scene is shaped around it. Every conversation is colored by it. Every choice Tommy makes this season is going to be made by a man who is carrying that specific weight and refusing to put it down even when it is destroying him from the inside. And here is what the trailer is not telling you about that. Here is the part that should make every single person who has been following this show stop and think very carefully about what is actually being set up. Cammy firing Tommy was not the ending of their story. It was not the closing of a chapter or the resolution of a conflict or the show making a clean break so that both characters could move forward separately. It was the opposite of all of those things. Cammy firing Tommy was the moment this story became truly dangerous. Because now these 2 people, who know each other better than anyone else in their respective worlds, who understand each other's weaknesses and pressure points and blind spots with an intimacy that only comes from years of surviving impossible situations side by side, are no longer on the same side. They are not enemies. It is so much more complicated and so much more devastating than enemies. They are 2 people who still fundamentally understand each other, still carry everything that was real between them, and are now pointed in opposite directions with everything at stake. And the trailer knows exactly what that means, which is why it is showing you their interactions with such careful, almost surgical precision. The formality between them in these new scenes is not cold, it is controlled. There is a massive difference between those 2 things, and the show is betting that you feel that difference even if you cannot immediately articulate it. Cold means the feeling is gone. Controlled means the feeling is so present and so overwhelming that both of them have decided, independently and probably painfully, that the only way to function is to keep an iron grip on it at all times. And iron grips, under enough pressure, always break. Let's talk about Cammy. Because the trailer is doing something with her character this season that is so precise and so deliberately constructed that if you blink at the wrong moment, you will miss exactly how significant it is. And most people are missing it. Most people are watching the scenes between Tommy and Cammy in this trailer and processing them through the lens of a relationship that ended badly. Through the lens of two people who loved each other and couldn't make it work, and are now navigating the painful and complicated aftermath of that failure. And that reading is not wrong. But it is incomplete in a way that matters enormously for understanding what Season 3 is actually building toward. Because the trailer is not showing us a woman dealing with the emotional fallout of a broken relationship while trying to run a company. It is showing us something far more unsettling than that. It is showing us a Cammy who has made her peace with the cost of what she did. Not happily, not without weight, but completely. And a person who has fully accepted the cost of a devastating decision is not the same as a person who is still processing it. They are operating from an entirely different place, a colder place, a place where clarity has replaced feeling as the primary driver of every choice. And that version of Cammy, the one this trailer is introducing us to, is genuinely one of the most formidable forces this show has ever put into motion. Understand what Cammy actually did at the end of Season 2 and understand it clearly. She did not simply fire Tommy. She did not make a clean professional decision and move on. She looked at the man she had loved through two of the most complicated and brutal seasons of television in recent memory. The man who had held things together for her and for everyone around him through circumstances that would have broken most people entirely. And she made the calculated decision that the only path forward for both of them ran directly through the most painful possible version of separation. That is not a decision you make lightly. That is not a decision you make without understanding exactly what it is going to cost you personally. And the Cammy we are seeing in this Season 3 trailer is the version of her that exists on the other side of having made that decision and lived inside the consequences of it long enough to know that there is no going back. The softness is not entirely gone. You can still feel it underneath everything, in the way she carries herself in certain moments, in the specific quality of the silences between her and Tommy when the trailer puts them in the same frame together. But it is buried now under something harder and more deliberate and far more dangerous. Because Cammy running MTEX is not Cammy playing a role she stumbled into. It is Cammy becoming exactly who she decided she needed to be when she made the choice that cost her everything she was not willing to lose the same way she had already lost everything else. And then there is the offshore rig. And this is where the trailer stops being about character dynamics and starts being about something that functions almost like fate in the architecture of this story. Newsom heading out to sea at the end of Season 2 was framed as a gamble, as a desperate, enormous, potentially catastrophic gamble that Cammy authorized because the alternative was watching MTEX slowly collapse under the weight of its own limitations with nothing left to show for everything that had been sacrificed to keep it alive. But the trailer is reframing that gamble in Season 3 in a way that changes its entire meaning. Because what looked like desperation at the end of Season 2 is now looking, through the lens of this trailer, like something closer to inevitability. Like a move that was always going to be made eventually because the story of MTEX and the story of Cammy and the story of what this industry does to the people who give everything to it was always building toward this specific moment of total commitment with no safety net underneath it. The imagery around that rig in the trailer is not accidental. Dark water, isolation, the overwhelming sense of something immense sitting just beneath the surface, patient and indifferent and completely beyond anyone's ability to control once it decides to move. That imagery is doing two things simultaneously. It is telling you about the physical reality of what Newsom is out there attempting. And it is telling you about the emotional and psychological reality of where Cammy is standing while she waits to find out if the most important gamble of her life is going to pay off or swallow her whole. Because here is what the trailer understands about the offshore rig storyline that most breakdowns are not fully engaging with. The rig is not just a plot device. It is not simply a mechanism for generating dramatic tension or creating a ticking clock that forces the other storylines to move faster. The rig is a mirror. Everything that Cammy is carrying this season, every sacrifice and every hard decision, and every moment where she chose the harder path because she believed it was the only one that led somewhere real, is reflected in what is happening out there in that dark water. If the rig succeeds, If Newsom comes back with something that validates every impossible choice Cammy made to get to this point, then this show is telling us something very specific about the relationship between sacrifice and reward, and whether the cost of this industry ever actually produces something worth the price. And if the rig fails, if all of that dark water gives back nothing, then the show is telling us something entirely different and considerably more devastating about what happens to the people who bet everything on an industry that has never once promised anyone a fair return on what they put into it. Either way, the consequence is massive. Either way, the ripple effect lands directly on Tommy, because a Cammy who wins out there is not a Cammy who needs anything from Tommy or from their shared history, or from the version of their relationship that still exists somewhere underneath all of the professional distance and carefully maintained formality. A Cammy who wins out there becomes something this show has never quite had before. A fully independent, fully resourced, fully realized force in her own right who is no longer defined in any structural way by her relationship to Tommy Norris. And the trailer is absolutely aware of what that means for every dynamic it has spent 2 seasons carefully constructing. But here is the thing about the offshore rig that the trailer is burying underneath all of that dramatic weight, and all of those carefully chosen images of dark water and isolation, and the specific loneliness of a gamble made at maximum scale. The rig storyline is not just about whether MTEX finds oil. It is about whether the distance between Tommy and Cammy, the distance that firing him created and that both of them have been maintaining with enormous effort and deliberate intention, survives contact with a genuine crisis. Because crises in this show do not respect professional boundaries. They do not honor the agreements that people make with themselves about who they are going to be and how they are going to behave when everything is working. Crises strip all of that away. They reduce people to their actual instincts, and the actual instinct that Tommy Norris has always had when something threatens the people he loves, regardless of what category they currently occupy in his life. Regardless of whether the professional relationship is intact or severed or complicated beyond easy description, is to move toward them, not away, toward. And the trailer is very carefully and very quietly setting up a situation where that instinct is going to be tested in a way that will cost him something significant, no matter which direction he chooses. So here is what you need to be asking yourself right now, not about the rig, not about whether MTEX strikes oil or comes back empty from all that dark water. Ask yourself this instead. Galino has been patient, more patient than any threat this show has introduced before him. Patient enough to let 2 full seasons pass while he positioned himself exactly where he needed to be. Patient enough to let Tommy build CTT and let Cammy take MTEX and let the distance between them grow into something that looks, from the outside, like a permanent separation. And if there is one thing this show has taught us about the people who operate at Galino's level, it is that they do not wait without a reason. So what exactly has Galino been waiting for? And why does this trailer feel like the answer to that? Question is something none of us are going to be ready for. Let's talk about Galino. Because everything else in this trailer, every emotional thread and every professional collision and every carefully constructed tension between the people who used to stand on the same side and are now navigating the complicated reality of standing apart, all of it exists inside a world that Galino is quietly reshaping around the edges. And the trailer is not giving you Galino loudly. It is not putting him front and center with dramatic music and obvious menace and every conventional signal that a television show uses to tell its audience that the dangerous person has arrived and you should be afraid now. It is doing something considerably more sophisticated and considerably more unsettling than that. It is giving you Galino the way this show has always given you its most genuinely dangerous forces, which is in glimpses, in implications, in the specific quality of tension that enters every scene he touches, not because of what he does in that scene, but because of what everyone else in that scene knows he is capable of doing and has not yet done. That restraint, that deliberate withholding of the full force of what